stations. 2 of them, or one split or something. We don't need to talk about that. But what I mean is, this wasn't a completely easy road. And she has stayed steady and strong. And you could say the same about Julie McCarty as well, and Fred. So she's done whatever it's taken to stay connected with her family and with God and with her mission. And so I praise God that you didn't lay it down. And I do believe you're saving lives and you're helping people to understand something that's very, very important and is a great blessing. So did you turn the cameras on? Okay, here you go.
All right. Wonderful. Here, let's give her a round of applause. So thank you, Monica. I love coming to True Texas because, like she outlined in the intro, True Texas Project is about action, right? We're not about just getting together to howl at the moon about a problem. We want to put action behind the problem, and that's what I really appreciate about True Texas. They don't invite people unless you've got some calls to action. So, like she said, I am Rebecca Hardy. I'm one of the original founders. I currently serve as the president of Texans for Vaccine Choice. We celebrated our 11th birthday in February, so we are 11 years strong. So we've been on the scene fighting for medical freedom well before COVID was even a word in our vocabulary, right? And so just very briefly, my why I have cared about this before it was kind of, quote, cool to care about vaccine choice, right? It's much more palatable. It's still very controversial, but it's far less of a hot potato issue. And a lot of that has to do with the massive spotlight that the COVID response gave to the world on just how overreaching Big Pharma is in nearly every aspect of our lives, right? So back up, I'm a 6th-generation Texan, born and raised in the Central Texas area, in Austin. Don't hold that against me. It was a very different town to grow up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I moved to the North Texas area in the late 90s for graduate school. I was a practicing speech pathologist for a couple of decades, and it was that experience as a young woman right out of graduate school, setting up my practice as a speech-language pathologist when a pattern quickly emerged with young mothers bringing their very young children into my office seeking services for speech or language. And the pattern that emerged was several of them had similar stories of normal development in their child that was arrested by a shop visit. And this was 27 years ago, and this was, this issue did not have the religious fervor that it has today. And so even then, I remember going home at night thinking, something's not right here, right? Like, doesn't the Lord give moms this instinct to know when something has changed in their child? Like, moms know every twitch, breath, blink, babble of their children, and when something has happened, they know. That's how we ensure the continuation of the human race. And so I really do think that somewhere along the way in society we stopped believing moms, which is probably one of the most, it's just heart-wrenching when you think about it, right? But moms know, right? So anyway, fast forward many years later, I met my husband. A couple years later than that, we're starting our own family, and those seeds that those moms had planted all those years before really germinated. And my husband and I just moved forward making very different vaccination decisions for our 2 daughters. So when Jason Villalba filed his bill in 2015 that would have removed the exemptions for school enrollment in Texas, it was going to be a personal problem for me because I had a child in her little 2-day-a-week Mother's Day out and one in kindergarten at the time. And it was like and they were both enrolled using the exemption affidavit, and it was like, oh no, right? Like, what am I going to do if this bill passes? And that's just kind of the joke's on me, right? Because it just takes one bill to wake you up and usher you right into your purpose on why God has you on this planet. So this little ragtag group of moms got together and essentially said, not on our watch. We're going to go down to Austin, figure out how to kill a bill. None of us had ever engaged politically, but we figured it out, right? And that's kind of just the birth of Texans for Vaccine Choice. And since our inception, we have defeated every bad bill that has been proposed in Austin. Like I mentioned earlier, this year we did celebrate our 11th year of community outreach and political engagement. But I want to make this distinction very clear. For the first 8 years, we were essentially primarily on the defense. We were maybe hoping for a pro-parent amendment on a CPS reform bill and such, but we were primarily on the defense just trying to kill bills. We really weren't getting traction on our good bills. And I'll get into this a little bit more later, but in 2023 and 2025, we finally, the script flipped, if you will, and that we were finally able to address our issue truly head on with the legislature. And in those 2 sessions combined, we have passed 13 standalone protective bills. So because of that work, we have a more streamlined exemption process. We have access to over-the-counter ivermectin, protections against being denied an organ transplant based on your vaccination status. Just to name a few, there's plenty of work to still be done, but that's kind of where we are. This is our mission statement is to protect and advance informed consent, medical privacy, and vaccine choice. You will not see limit your access to vaccines or dismantle the vaccination program of America, right? We are truly for vaccine choice and truly believe that your vaccination status should be irrelevant to your job, to your participation in society, to your enrollment, and really anything else. So these are just overview goals and priorities. We just want to ensure that your medical, anything that you decide to opt into is truly based on informed consent and free of all coercion and mandates. All right, so this is just kind of a snapshot of where we are with our nation's youth right now, okay? And I just want you to kind of read kind of where we are statistically with our nation's youth, right? We've got a lot of children with chronic conditions such as obesity, asthma, behavior problems, learning problems, and a 2011 study estimated that 43% of U.S. children, that's 32 million children, currently have at least one chronic health condition. That rate increases to 54% when you factor in obesity or being at risk for developmental delays. So I just want you to really think about that, because in 2020-2021 school year, there were 15% of all public school students in America were receiving some sort of special education services. And I mention that because I really want you to think back. I'm not trying to age anyone in this room. So the adults only, this poll that I'm about to, it's an informal poll that you are free to participate in or not, right? I believe in informed consent. But I want you to think back on your elementary school or your junior high or even your high school. And can you think of a child that maybe had a significant behavior issue or a learning disability? Raise your hand if you can think of one person, one?
One
right.
or two. Mm-hmm.
But it stands out, right? It stands out because it was so unusual, right? I will tell you, I went to a very large public high school, and this was in the 90s. There was one self-contained classroom with maybe 10 kids in the entire high school. But if I talk to my parents, they say there wasn't any in their high school, right? So it stands out because it's just so rare from generations ago. We currently have a generation of children for the first time ever that have a lower life expectancy than their parents, right? And so I am not here to point the fingers solely at vaccines. There's mounting evidence that a lot of other environmental factors are at play here. But perhaps as we dive in tonight, we will all agree that we can't necessarily ignore the vaccine component. All right, so we're going to start here. Tonight, I just was kind of praying about what to share with y'all, and I just decided I have not come to this satellite of True Texas to share kind of my vaccine safety overview. So that's kind of where we are. I have some additional slides at the end that I tacked on that are a little bit more like where we at as a state. So if we have time, we will dive into those, or if you're interested, or if you want to stay, and we'll just keep going. I do have to get back to Keller, and I'd love to get home before, 10. Let's say that. Okay. All right. So we are going to start with this general overview of vaccine safety. And so to truly appreciate kind of where we are, let's go back, okay? So we're going to look at this vaccine schedule. This is a comparison of where we were in 1983. A fully vaccinated child, by the time they turned 15 or graduated from high school, they would have received 24 doses of vaccines. Okay? What?
I'm sorry. I'm looking at that list going, yeah, that's...
So, and then here we are, here's where we are in last year, at 2025, okay? And I'm going to kind of camp here for just a little bit. So and I do have this back there on the table. So if you're like, oh, I really wish I'd taken a picture of that, just grab this. Everything on that table is free, so please take it. So let's start here, right here, on the diamond, and yes, this is kind of small, but you can see the diamonds. Those vaccines are manufactured using aborted fetal cells. So I'm going to say it again. These are vaccines. Every vaccine has to have a live tissue to grow the antigen, the actual viral component of the vaccine. And those with the diamond next to them are that tissue in those vaccines are from aborted babies. So you've probably seen like the big expose, was it maybe 5 years ago, where Planned Parenthood was caught selling baby parts. This is why there is a market. And this is why I just want to yell at my computer screen or my television every time some talking head comes on and says, there's no valid religious exemption, right? Well, there is, right? I also want to point out that there's some diseases on here for which we vaccinate our children for that are not typical childhood vaccines. We have this hepatitis B vaccine that's given on day 1 of life. Mm-hmm. Hep B is a disease of the sexually promiscuous or the unsafe drug users. I don't know about y'all, but my newborns were not participating in either of those activities. And so why we're doing this onslaught of hepatitis B vaccines all the way through, this infanthood is baffling. And then we have the somewhat controversial HPV or Gardasil shots as well, which is also something you don't just catch in society by just existing and being around other people, right? Along with some others as far as communicability in society. You don't just catch tetanus either, do you? So anyway, before I get a little bit further down the road, I just want to make sure y'all know that pretty much every little nugget that I am relaying could be a whole presentation on its own, okay? So I'm just kind of giving you we're just scratching the surface tonight, if that works, so if we can just agree on that, because I'm looking at my notes, and these are notes I've used before, and I'm like, oh man, I could really go deep into that, but we just are going to have to move forward with just kind of this high-level overview, and maybe I do have a lot of material back there on the table that does go deeper into some of this. But let's talk about how vaccines are tested. So some people in this room might be on a maintenance medication of some sort, or blood pressure, or what have you. Those medications were all tested in these long-term, double-blind, placebo-based tests. That's the gold standard of scientific testing. Vaccines, because of how they are classified as biologics and not as medications. The testing threshold is much, much lower. Another biologic product would be a blood product. And so if you think about that, you think, okay, they probably make sure it's clean, they make sure it's not contaminated, but there's not any sort of very rigorous testing going on. So I just want to make that very clear. There is no long-term testing or any sort of placebo-based requirement for vaccines. So this is a product that is essentially mandated on our nation's children, and the safety requirements are very, very low. So so vaccines are tested individually. So let's take this rotavirus at 4 months. They will test this vaccine individually. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, right? But what's not happening is testing this complete suite of vaccines that are given at 4 months old in pediatrician offices across the nation. They're not tested as how they are administered. They just keep on adding more vaccines and more doses and more boosters to the schedule with the assumption of safety, but without actually testing the groupings as they are administered. Now, we can tease out this individual testing a little bit more and see, well, what do they use as a placebo, right? They have to test it against something, right? Most vaccines are tested against another vaccine as the placebo. So if you have, a new meningitis shot in this arm and have the old meningitis shot in this arm, as long as this new one doesn't cause more reactions than this one, then guess what? It's deemed safe, right? This is the standard that they are using. So when you have this entire vaccination program built on this assumption of safety, because, well, it didn't cause any more reactions than this one. Well, what was this one tested on? Well, it didn't cause any more reaction than this one. Well, what was that one tested on? And it's just, if you keep on going down, it's all built on, there's this book that's been released on vaccine safety called Turtles All the Way Down. And the way that the reason behind the title of that book is that this idea of, well, what holds up the earth, the world? Well, it's a turtle. We are on a turtle's back, right? Well, what's holding up the turtle? Another turtle. What's holding up that turtle? Another turtle. And it's turtles all the way down. And that's kind of a really good picture of the vaccination program and how safety is determined. It's just all the way down, we're just assuming safety. And I talked about how, vaccines aren't tested as they're given. I just want to make it very clear, and they are certainly not tested as a schedule of the whole as well. So, again, I don't mean to age anyone in this room, but I would ask, when was the last time that maybe you got a booster of any sort?
I had the shingles.
Okay.
And I got that booster.
Okay. There you go. But when was the last time you got a vaccine of MMR? When was the last time you got a DTaP?
I was in the military, I got it every year.
Yeah, you sure did. Yeah, we can talk about that later.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So
And I was in law enforcement, and when they sent a group of us for EMT training, we had to get everything because my stuff was on microfiche.
Oh my goodness.
And so I had to get everything back over again.
When was this?
Back in 90.
90. Okay, so it's been a minute though. Right.
Yeah.
So I bring that up because what do we hear on the television all day long? It's herd immunity. If we are all not vaccinated, then we won't have herd immunity. Well, guess what? If we all have not consented to the entirety of this schedule, there is no herd, right? Mm-hmm. I haven't had a vaccine in forever. Most of y'all have not had anything on this schedule, right, in the last, decade or two.
I can say last time I had a vaccine was Carter was president.
There you go, when Carter was president. Yeah.
Hey, I think I can agree with that.
Yeah.
They lined us up, I remember. I think it might not have been Carter, it might even been Ford, but it was the swine flu.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'll get to that. I will get to swine flu in just a second.
And I'm old enough that when I was in elementary school, I had to get all those things.
Right, they probably gave you that sugar cube, didn't they?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And I still have the little mark from smallpox.
Yes. What's interesting, I'm glad you brought up smallpox. Do you see that smallpox is not on the vaccination schedule?
Yeah.
It's not on there because it hasn't been on there since like the 70s. So shouldn't we be celebrating, it shouldn't be marker of success for any vaccine be when we can pull it off the schedule, right? Because it's gone. What are we doing here? We keep on adding more and more and more. And we'll get to a little bit more on why I think that is in just a minute. But I do want us to just talk very briefly about the ingredients in vaccines. And I have a handout back there that addresses vaccine ingredients. And these are listed on any insert of any vaccine that you are considering taking. But this list encompasses almost all of vaccines, so not every single one contains all of these ingredients. I want to make that very clear. But we have MSG and formaldehyde, antibiotics, a lot of tissues, right? I mentioned aborted fetal cells earlier, but any vaccine that is not grown with human cells, they have to have some sort of live tissue. So it's cows or monkeys or dogs or sheep or bugs or rabbits. Did I mention pigs? Yeah, ducks and other eggs. And so many of these ingredients have never been clinically approved by the FDA, and so it really does defy common sense and basic safety standards when we keep approving vaccines that contain these never proven safe ingredients. So again, all that stuff is on the back table there. I want to talk very quickly about, not really quickly, I want to really highlight this blue box, okay? Because and that is that in 1986, our Congress, under President Reagan, passed a bill that removed all liability from vaccine makers. And I want to explain a little bit more on why that happened. In the late 70s and in the early 80s, the pharmaceutical companies essentially petitioned Congress and said, we are going to have to stop making vaccines because we are losing money hand over fist because of the lawsuits from the damages that our products are creating. And Congress, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall, right? Because Congress, in their infinite wisdom at that time, instead of saying, I don't know, maybe you fix your products so they're not harming children, they granted their petition and granted them this sweeping liability shielding for all vaccines. So tell me, where is the incentive to create a safe and effective product that when you have no liability?
That's bad.
It's bad, right?
No other item that's given to you has that protection.
That's exactly right. Much less one that's
Automobiles,
almost
guns, nothing.
mandated in many instances, right? So I tell my girls all the time, I say, find a product that you can get a state legislature to mandate on its citizens, but for which you have no consumer liability. Like, that's the most perfect model for the company, but it leaves the consumer 100% holding the bag. The doctor's not liable when something bad happens. The nurse isn't, and Pfizer sure as heck isn't, right? And so we kind of have this runaway aggressive schedule. It is the most bloated vaccine schedule of any developed nation on our planet, and it's a pretty big problem. All right, so anyway, we did have some movement happen, right? We had Trump very much so committed to having Bobby Kennedy in HHS. He very much so made good on that promise, and we kind of have this more national movement towards an embracing of that MAHA movement, right? And we saw Kennedy get in there, and it took a while, but he vacated the ACIP committee, that panel, that committee that is kind of an ad hoc CDC committee. This is a committee that essentially creates the vaccination policies for our nation. This committee has received a lot of criticism in the past for being full of people very conflicted when it comes to their interests. These are people that literally have patents or some sort of financial interest in the very products that they are then turn around and mandate. It has been a big problem for a long time, and Kennedy went in there and removed all of them and seated a new panel. It was really exciting, right? And what we saw earlier this year in January, what we saw is a finally, somewhat of a return to sanity when it came to the vaccine program. Okay? So, we had the CDC revise the schedule to align with international standards. So this was, Bobby Kennedy was like, listen, this schedule is unlike any other nation in the world. We are going to compare ours to other developed nations and see what are true international standards, and removed a lot of those doses. So just to review, we were at 75 doses. They removed it, they got it down to 43 doses, and a lot of these shots were removed from that routine for all children, bless you, recommendation. It's very important to hear me when I say that routine for all children, that classification on any vaccine is what triggers that liability shielding. So as soon as we had a lot of those vaccines and a lot of those doses fall off the schedule, it opened up a lot more liability. So this change just happened in January. Okay? How do you think these vaccine manufacturers felt when this liability shielding that they have enjoyed since 1986 was pierced? Pretty angry. Like they've had this captive audience of these every kid in the nation essentially being lined up for this runaway schedule, and that every injection is profits, right? For which they have no liability. And then what happened? A lot of those vaccines dropped off as no longer routine. So, but I want to point out very, very importantly, is that while this was a huge shift, it does not resolve any of those issues that I previously talked about, right? It does not solve the lack of placebo-controlled trials. It does not solve the absence of long-term studies, or the lack of cumulative testing, or the ingredients, or anything else that I pointed out previously. So this was a really exciting thing in January that happened, and I remember the staff call where it's a little staffified here at TFBC. When this happened, we got on our Monday call and we were like, is this real life? Is this really happening? When's the other shoe going to drop? Well, guess what? It dropped on March 16th. We had an activist judge out of Boston who the American Academy of Pediatrics decided to sue Bobby Kennedy and HHS. And this guy, Judge Brian Murphy, granted the AAP's petition. So we're talking about AAP, a paid membership dues entity with our American pediatricians, sued a federal agency, and this activist judge granted their petition. What this petition did is that it voided all of the new ACIP, any votes that they had taken, any decisions they had made, completely nullified. It vacated this new committee, basically saying that he decided that none of them were qualified to sit on the committee, and basically said all of these vaccines are restored back to routine for all children. And it was when we said, when is the other shoe going to drop? Well, Judge Murphy threw it down, right? Now, a couple of things have shifted even in the last couple of weeks. One is, Bobby Kennedy has come out and said, we are looking at appeals. I know that some other third parties have potentially looked to appeal this decision as well. And then last week, what Bobby Kennedy did is he released a new charter for ACIP, basically kind of rewriting how the whole thing is structured. So I know he's pursuing the possibility of just rewriting how ACIP is structured, and therefore getting to avoid having to even appeal that. Like it's kind of another arrow in the quiver of the way to kind of beat Judge Murphy in his own game. But when that happened, we reverted back to the 2025 schedule. So this is where we are currently. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster, you can imagine, here in TFBC land. We have literally just approved all of our new materials with this new schedule on it, and we were ready to send it all to print, literally on like March 14th, and we were like, oh, thanks, Brian. Thanks a lot. So we're back here. And so this is why we have this little disclaimer. This reflects the most current information that we know right now. Are we hopeful that things will shift back? Yes, but this is just, we actually have the honor and privilege to live out vaccine history in real time. And so I'm along for the ride and know that the Lord is too. He's got this. So I do want to talk a little bit more about exactly what this liability shielding really did afford. And I want to make a big distinction because there is this National Child and Vaccine Injury Act. That's that law that I talked about earlier, that 1986 law. But we also have the PrEP Act. Suddenly we all got to know the PrEP Act really intimately, right, during the COVID response, because all of those COVID jabs, even masks and remdesivir and Paxlovid, all of those were authorized under the emergency use authorization, right, which are all covered by the PrEP Act. So essentially we have two laws working, there's two different laws, the outcome is the same, right, and that is that none of these products have traditional liability, right? The consumer is left holding the bag. And that is a big problem, honestly, because we have, I would say that America in many ways is very, I mean, we're kind of obsessed with consumer protections, right? Like we really ensure that our products are safe. Like think about that car seat that you buy for that newborn baby, right? You spend hours researching the best car seat. And if that, Graco car seat fails, guess what you can do? You can sue Graco, right? You can't sue consumer, you can't sue Pfizer, and I'm just gonna, you can imagine that that my job at TNBC becomes a ministry a lot of days, right? Because people don't come and find me unless they've been catastrophically damaged by this program. Okay, and this week is actually really weighing very heavily on me because I've gotten more than the normal amount of phone calls. So if I'm a little emotional or bring it a little bit heavier, you'll know why. And it's just because the true burden of vaccine injury is really unseen, right? Because these parents are they're in many times they are trapped at home with their adult children. I mean, these are children that these parents feel like they can never die, right? Because they have these adult children that are, as they get older, they grow, they become adult sized, but many of them are nonverbal. They're still in diapers. They are very destructive or they're violent, and it's just, these stories are heartbreaking, and yet these people still very much so live in the shadows, and there's not a lot of outlets for services and care. Our state doesn't really care very well for these catastrophically disabled children, and it's a stain on our state. It really is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I do want to. I brought a prop, okay, and I brought this. We order our stickers from this company called Sticker Mule, and they're very proud of their mule sauce. So if you want to try mule sauce, order something from Sticker Mule. They'll send you a free bottle of mule sauce. This has ingredients in it that I don't eat, so it became a prop. The reason why I bring this is because I just want to make it very clear. If this barbecue sauce makes me sick or kills me or anything, I have recourse with Sticker Mule, right? But these vaccines that we are injecting into nearly every child in America has less liability than this mule sauce that my sticker company sends me. And this is why I carry barbecue sauce where I go, because it's a really good contrast of what we're doing here. Like what that has more liability than an actual pharmaceutical that is mandated on our children. It's not okay. It's really not. All right, I do want to talk a little bit about, here, let me see where my slide is. Okay. I talked a little bit about that conflict of interest. I want to talk a little bit more of what that 1986 law did. It set up this compensation program. So when I talk about vaccine injury, it's not an urban legend, it's not some myth. There's an entire federal program that was created to address the issue of vaccine injury. Congress said, well, if we're not going to hold them liable, we need to find a way to somehow compensate the injured. So again, the federal government acknowledges that vaccines can and do harm people. This is a taxpayer-funded program. I'm going to say that again. It is your money that is funding the vaccine injured. And I looked it up a couple of weeks ago. We had passed the $5.6 billion mark of payouts from this fund. Now, I think it's probably pretty easy to say, well, $5.6 billion since 1986. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket, right, when it comes to our entire national budget. It's very important to know that a study came out a good number of years ago that sussed out that about 1% of vaccine injuries are ever even reported to the adverse event reporting system. So let's pretend that all 1% are compensated. They aren't even remotely, but for the sake of math, let's pretend that 1% number are all compensated. That $5.6 billion amount reflects 1% of the true burden of vaccine injury in our nation. So, they like to point out, like, the people that support these mandates and support these very oppressive policies love to say that the vaccine injury rate, it's just 1%, right? Well, it's not 1% if it's your child, right?
Right.
And 1% of all children in Texas is 40,000 children. That's how many are born every year. So those people are saying that 40,000 damaged children a year are okay. It's not okay to me, right? It shouldn't be okay to anyone. If a parent wants to take their child to be vaccinated, that's fine. But do I contend that that informed consent has basically gone out the window with these vaccines? Absolutely. I got a mole removed off my back a couple of years ago. I had probably signed 20 pages of all the things that could potentially happen in that 20-minute in-office appointment, right? But when it comes to these irreversible medical procedures known as vaccines, it's here you go. And that is such a huge just stain, again, on what are we doing here? These parents should be afforded informed consent, and they certainly shouldn't be told that they have to do this in order to have their child enrolled in school, and that's certainly not the case in Texas. All right. Because COVID is still coming up quite a bit. This is the actual, I have the source document over here. It's openvaers.com, and this is through December of last year. These are the injuries through December, and these are just the ones that have been reported, right? And so it was 1.7 million reports through December 5th on the COVID jabs alone. So somebody mentioned swine flu earlier today, right? Was it you? Yes. The swine flu vaccine was released in 1976, and it was pulled off the market after it showed a 1 in 100,000 risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome. Let's take another one. There was a rotavirus vaccine that was released in 1999. It was pulled after showing a 1 in 10,000 risk of bowel obstruction. The COVID vaccines were released in 2020. They are still on the market with a serious adverse event rate between 1 in 800 and 1 in 1,000. Right? So this graph here kind of brings it all together. This is, again, from openvaers.com. OpenVAERS, so VAERS is that vaccine adverse event reporting system. We all got to learn a lot more about the VAERS system during COVID, right? And this brings an OpenVAERS. I don't know who created OpenVAERS, but I would love to give them a trophy someday. And they created a website that takes all of the raw data from VAERS and makes it into a much more user-friendly interface. It will shock no one in this room to learn that a government website is not user-friendly, right? So this Open Bears website seeks to make it far more approachable for the layman. So if you look at Open Bears this is all reports of vaccine injuries starting in 2010. You can see that the injury reports were relatively stable throughout 2020, right? And then what happened? What happened in 2021 where the injury reports just started skyrocketing, right? And again, these are all still on the market.
The mRNA vaccines.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So in my world, this data speaks volumes, right? We have millions of reports, thousands of families impacted, and a system that continues to minimize these voices, censor the voices, gaslight people into that didn't really happen. And these aren't, like I mentioned earlier, these aren't just numbers. These are real people behind these injuries, right?
I know lots of them.
I know. I was going to say, if you know somebody that's been injured by their COVID vaccine or any vaccine, raise your hand, right? Yeah. Pretty much everybody knows somebody, right?
Mine were, I guess, I don't know, it's not like a permanent injury, but one of my cousins almost died. It gave her stuff with her heart that she'd never had before.
Killed her grandmother. Forced her to take it in the home
Yeah,
where she'd had to sit in isolation.
right.
It's just wicked. There's no other word for it except wicked, and I'm so sorry.
Well, the mRNA vaccine was originally, they were trying to patent the human DNA, and the Supreme Court wouldn't let them do it, so they said, can we patent this? Because once that you take that shot, it changes your DNA, and now you're the property of the pharmaceutical company, is what the Supreme Court ruled, because that no longer makes you human.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, we did a massive global-wide experiment, right? And it epically failed, but we still have people just clinging to this program with their, in some respects, cold dead hands, right? And this is truly why TFPC exists, to ensure that these voices and these stories are not ignored. So, I do want to just kind of do an overview of what TFPC is currently working on. I've kind of broad stroked this, but we truly do try to tackle this issue from every angle, both politically at the legislature, but also I remember that first session, right? We formed after the legislature was already gavelled in, and none of us knew what was going on, right? I mean, I giggle at our very humble beginnings. It's wonderful to think about how far the Lord has brought us, to Monica's point earlier. And that is, so I remember thinking during that first session when we're in this committee hearing and the electeds up on the dais are discussing taking away our rights. And I remember thinking, we're too late, right? This was decided in the ballot box. This was decided several months previously. So we have got to get involved in elections to get better people elected. And so we did that. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Michelle, are you going to be making endorsements on the runoff next month?
Yeah, our voter guide is already on our website. If you go under Get Political, there's a drop down for elections, and our voter guide is there. Yes. Great question. So elections, but then we also fundamentally understand too that let's pretend I can wave a magic wand and pass any bill I want to do tomorrow. It doesn't change the hearts and minds issue that we have. Like you were talking about your Granbury mom groups and everything. This is still a hot potato issue. It's less now. People are more open than ever to have these discussions, and for that I'm very grateful. I'm not grateful for the COVID response, but if I can be part of redeeming a whole lot of wickedness by having these conversations and opening minds, and use me, here I am, use me, but we also have a very robust outreach program that is training and equipping people to have these effective conversations over a tricky topic, right? And we help people have these discussions in a way that truly build bridges with love and aren't just throwing bombs, right? And like say we disagree, we have that conversation in a way that leaves the relationship intact, right? Because like Monica said earlier, Big Pharma's biggest dream is to have this issue divide families, divide friends, divide neighbors, divide communities. And we don't want them to win on that, right? So let's build bridges with love and have these conversations in an effective way, because whether the person is pro-vaccine or anti, we don't care, right? We're trying to help people realize that medical liberty truly is for everyone, and vaccine choice is a human rights issue. It's not a partisan issue, at least it shouldn't be. Yes, sir.
So Julie McCarty's daughter was in the EMT nursing program, and they tried to force her to take the vaccine, so they sent it to Gary Van Dever's committee, and Gary Van Dever promised to push it through, but then at the last minute, he said, no, I'm not going to push it through because I don't like the author of the bill.
Yep.
So now Chris Spencer's going to be replacing Gary Van Dever.
Well, he's replacing him in that seat, but he won't be a chairman.
Oh.
Right, it doesn't go to that House seat. But yes, we had a very interesting session with Representative Van Dever in charge of public health. I mean, this is a guy in far East Texas. His issue is water, so why Nessenberg's put him in charge of public health is beyond me. He was definitely an obstacle to getting, we had probably well over a dozen bills that the Senate sent over. They passed out of our HHS committee over the Senate, where they went to the Public Health Committee in the House to die. So, we did get some bills fully passed, and I'm very excited about that, but they were some of our smaller bills. And we had some really, really vital pieces of legislation that died on the vine. And I will get to that right here. You have it right. You jumped ahead, so I'm thank you for that. So this is just kind of our current, what we're working on. We do have 2 AG opinion requests that are pending. Both of them are now officially, I don't want to say overdue, just because as long as the AG's office asks for an extension of time, then they get it, right? And so they have both are past their 180-day timeline, but they have asked for additional time. And honestly, we all know that Ken Paxton's office has been a little busy, right? And I'd rather his office spend ample time researching these opinion requests and get them right than to rush through this. So I'm not disparaging Ken Paxton at all. I just am letting you know that these are things that we are waiting for responses for any day now. But one is on exclusions. You might have recalled the measles outbreak in West Texas last year, and we had some school districts up there that were completely arbitrarily applying exclusion statutes to the children using exemptions up there. And when I say arbitrarily, I mean illegally. And so we just would like to have the AG opine on how these exclusions should be implemented during an outbreak. And then one on the ESA. TFBC did not take a position on the school choice bill, but we are now at a point now that the bill is effective, wanting the AG to opine on whether schools that accept that ESA money must also then accept the exemptions for enrollment. So that's kind of what that one is. You already discussed primary runoffs, so thank you for that. So yes, we have our voter guide up there. And then we also are heading to the state convention, which I hope a lot of y'all are going to the convention as well. And we will be working to ensure that our informed consent plank is the strongest as possible. And hopefully we can also get our legislative priority language adopted by the full delegation as well. On our website, under Get Political, there is a state convention drop-down. You can get all of that information for TFBC's involvement at the RPT State Convention there. And then we also, as far as our priorities heading into the next legislative session, which we all know pretty much starts today, it starts now, the prep work, laying the groundwork for all of these legislative priorities, including at the convention, because almost every bill that we support during the regular session really starts at the convention in many respects. And you'll see what I have listed here. We have some very glaring loopholes in our statutes that allow for mandates for some Texans. And the Texans that are truly not protected from vaccine mandates are our healthcare workers, our healthcare students, and just patients getting fired from medical care across the state. So those are the things that we will be focusing very much so as we are kind of for like the next year and a half, as we are heading towards session, and then the session that starts in January. We, of course, like I said, we always have a call to action. If there is a sign-up sheet, if you do not receive our emails, I would love for you to sign up. We do not spam you. I think if you get our emails, like we are very mindful of our emails. We send a once a week email on Tuesdays. We call it the TFBC Tuesday. We love a good alliteration around here at TFBC. When there are action alerts, and especially during session, that once a week schedule is off, right? Because we're just like, we're lucky if we get 48 hours before a bill is being heard. So we will send out very timely action alerts, and that is oftentimes maybe even 3 times a week sometimes. But we make our action alerts very, very turnkey. Our website really is a treasure trove of information, so please go play around with it. Go learn what your rights are. I can dive in more to that when I mentioned that I added a couple slides at the end, and we can talk a little bit more about that as well. We also have ample volunteer opportunities. We are a nonprofit, and we do not have large corporate sponsors like Pharma does to line up to help us. So if you are able to donate, that's always something we need. I will tell you, Big Pharma spends more on their lobbyist dairy session than our 2-year budget. So it's fine. We do a lot. We're all moms here at Team Shaker FBC, so we know how to stretch a dollar, but man, we could really use your help. Anyway, and then follow us on social media as well. We're still quite censored over there, but still follow us because we like to put out lots of fun, good content there. I'm open to questions, but then I'm also willing to go into a little bit more of the weeds if y'all are wanting that. So you tell me. Any questions? Okay, I'm gonna go for it. Okay. On our website, we have one of the tabs at the top says Get Answers, and we have it really teased down into different categories. And so I wanted to kind of just talk to you, like this is kind of like where we are as a state when it comes to our rights to say no. And I have it divided into different boxes. The first one being enrollment. And you can see all the categories of educational facilities that must accept the exemption affidavit in Texas. This includes all licensed daycares. It includes all K through 12 public and charter schools, any private school that it receives state funding, K through 12, and all higher education facilities. The only category of schools that where funding is involved is K through 12. Daycare and higher ed, funding is irrelevant. This comes up all the time. That's why I'm making the distinction. All right? So as you can see, though, healthcare students are very much so left out. If they want to do any sort of clinical rotations, they are essentially mandated. So while they may be able to enroll with the exemption affidavit, they can't actually complete their coursework without these mandated vaccines. Over here we have a whole section on our website on that drop down under Get Answers for families. So let's talk a little bit about this. We get a lot of questions on the newborn procedures that are recommended when you first have your baby. This includes the hepatitis B vaccine, the RSV antibodies that the CDC is calling this a vaccine. So there's that. There's what we internally call the eye goop, the antibiotic eye ointment that they apply to all babies' eyes, and there's one more, the newborn screening, right, with the heel prick and such. I'm not telling you whether to consent or not to consent on all of those. What I'm telling you is that you can say no legally in Texas for all of those if you want. And we outline the statutes that protect you, and we also outline what to say, how to navigate a hospital that might be getting pushy on those items. Next is MTRAC. This is our state's vaccine registry. It is our position, and the state agrees, that if you're going to have the state track your vaccinations, it should be by consent only, an opt-in program, right? And that's how it is currently set up. Every session, we have bills that would make MTRAC opt out. It would basically enroll everyone, and then you have to go through the bureaucratic steps to remove you, to unenroll. Yes, sir.
Are hospitals still kind of forcing the issue by calling CPS?
Are you talking about in traffic?
Right, like if you have a newborn, you say, I really don't want to get any of this stuff done, and then the hospital turns around and calls CPS on you. Then you're walking through with a social worker.
Yeah. I will tell you, 5 years ago, we would get phone calls every week about hospitals being horrible on this. The good news, we are happy warriors here at TFDC. So if we can find the good news and be able to relay it, I'm here for it, right? The good news is, I will tell you, the reports of that happening are far fewer and in between now. And I'm very grateful for that. Is it still happening? Absolutely. And that's why we kind of give you some outlines on that website on how to navigate a hospital that might be using very coercive or threatening language. We've had many reports, and it's so despicable, right? I mean, this poor woman has just birthed this human, and now we have this nurse that's saying, well, I have to call CPS. No, you don't. What I say on our website is, if you can show me the law I'm breaking, I'd be happy to reconsider. Right? Put the onus on them to show you because according to this, health and safety code XYZ, this tells me that I am completely within my legal rights to say no. And put it on them to show where does it require you to call CPS for me simply declining this. I'd be happy to reconsider if you would show me what law I'm breaking, or what law compels you to call CPS.
But how many moms and young couples even
Right.
know that that's coming?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair. And that's why we are all about information and educating and getting this
Because
information.
most people that know this would be your homeschool,
Yeah.
home birth.
Like I said earlier, there were, I don't want to call them silver linings, but if there's some redemption to be had from the COVID era, it's that more and more people than ever are awake to this. I don't want to pick you out, but you're my mom's age, and it's this age group has historically been the hardest age. Your age group has been the hardest age group because your generation was the what about polio generation, the doctors know everything generation, and that's I'm not.
I just looked up the vaccinations. Last one I remember was like 4th grade. We had 6.
6, right? Can I ask what decade you were born in?
What year? I'll have to stop and think. 1950.
Okay, yes. So exactly, you're right at
I'm old.
You were very young, ma'am.
Oh, come on. Now. I was born in 62.
I was gonna say 1950 is young. That is very young.
I'm still here.
You go, girl.
My mom was born in 1951.
There you go.
Sorry, Mom. And she would say the same thing. Like people still think like this is what's the big deal? What are we fighting over? It's just 6 shots, right? It's not. It's a runaway train when it comes to this. And you can really point back to that 1986 law. I mean, it took about a decade after that law was passed for them to really realize what they were able to do.
But
They were able to keep on having more and more vaccines. What?
Aren't most schools teaching children that this is the way to go? I mean, in other words, because we have like a 35-year-old son that basically kind of came back and said, well, I mean, you have to have all these vaccines.
So, yes, so in Texas, I think it was back in I can't remember what year, 2019, 2020, we actually participated in an SBOE hearing in order, because the health teaks had come up for revision and potential readoption, and we got very involved in that because there's a lot of teaks, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, pertaining to vaccines and teaching that they're the best thing since sliced bread, right? And we simply came in and said, maybe we could offer more balanced language. Like if you're going to talk about vaccines, talk about the injury profiles, right? We're not telling you not to talk about them, but just be balanced about it, right? And we had a member on the SBOE that was ready to bring those amendments forward. She did. She brought them forward, and it looked like we were going to win. and at the last minute, at the last committee hearing when they were about to vote on it, she withdrew all of her amendments and said, "I've heard from the medical community." And so it,
AKA check.
yeah, exactly. Thankfully, when she was up for re-election the next time, she was primaried out, and so thank you to Brandon Hall, who we have now. So, that was Pat Hardy, no relation. So back here, if you do think that
Let's go,
you
Brandon.
might be enrolled in MTRAC, maybe you unintentionally enrolled. We hear from Texans all the time that said, I opted out, like I did not give them permission, and yet I'm still getting mail from the health department saying my kid is probably due for vaccines, and it's all tied to MTRAC. So we have lots of reports of people being enrolled even though they never consented. So we have the opt-out, the withdrawal form linked on our website if you want to just mail it in just to see if you are enrolled or not. There are statutes in Texas that do protect parents that are not vaccinating from CPS involvement. Those statutes and some very helpful letters are also linked on our website. We've got public services like WIC and SNAP and TAMP and Medicaid. None of those require vaccines for participation. The statutes that back that up are listed on our website. So don't have anybody that tries to say, oh, the lady at WIC is telling me that I have to get it. No, you absolutely don't. You are protected statutorily in Texas. Like I mentioned earlier, we do have protections for organ transplant patients being denied organs based on vaccination status. Finally, in Texas, these are probably the most heartbreaking phone calls that I get, but I want to make it very clear, just because we passed this bill does not mean that hospitals are not still doing this. I got a phone call 2 weeks ago from a man here in this general area. I can't remember where he lives, but somewhere in here. And he said that their 6-month-old baby is being denied a heart because she's completely unvaccinated. And this kind of conditioning medical care, life-saving, true life-saving care based on vaccination status has to stop. And then we also have some blogs and articles. We've even had a holistic vet on our podcast a couple of times to address this kind of the emerging issue, I would say, on vaccines and our pets. Like I mentioned, we do have our priority down here as far as denial of care. We have shored up, we've kind of had this patchwork, right? We've kind of mostly solved the issue with organ transplants being denied care. We passed a bill in 2023 saying that if you are a Medicaid and CHIP paid doctor, you cannot deny patients, your Medicaid and CHIP patients based on vaccination status. What we really need to do is just make it illegal for doctors to deny care across the board for any sort of medical service. So that's where we're headed. And then we also have a lot of resources on our website on if your employer happens to decide to get jab happy. And we have it teased out by if you work in a nursing home, if you work in a medical facility, if you work in a daycare. We have it very much so teased out on our website. And as you can see, the priority here is our healthcare workers because they're essentially the only Texas employees that are still under mandates. And then I mentioned that we were finally able to get a little bit of traction legislatively in these post-COVID sessions. And this slide highlights our legislative wins in the 2021, 2023, and 2025 legislative sessions, where the previous slides from the previous sessions would have been very, very empty. We had a few amendments added to a CPS overhaul bill. When I talk about on this slide that we have CPS protections, it's from that 2017 session when CPS reform was a priority of Governor Abbott's. And so that was pretty much the only thing prior to 2021 that we were successful in doing. Like I said, we were primarily defeating bad bills. Now we've actually got gained traction on our good bills and hope to continue that track record in 2027. So.
My whole family almost lost their jobs during that. I had nurse, and I'm a dietitian, and my daughter was a teacher, and my son-in-law is a postal carrier, and my nephew's a doctor, and we're like, so the kids had already said they guess they would be out of a job because they weren't gonna do it.
Good for them.
And it's right about then is when it started getting taken to, no, you can have this choice. So they managed to sidestep it, but.
It was really hard there for several months.
Mm-hmm.
At TFEC, we were fielding hundreds, if not thousands, of inquiries during the height of the COVID response. You know, we had this executive order from Abbott that apparently disallowed those COVID vaccine mandates. But guess what? Most companies did in Texas. They ignored it, right? And they got away with it because that executive order had no teeth, and it was clear that Governor Abbott wasn't really interested in even enforcing it. And so we just, I mean, it was, talk about a game of tyranny whack-a-mole that we were playing for about a year. It was horrible. When we finally did pass these COVID vaccine mandates, it was the third special session in 2023. That bill did not go into effect until February of 2024. Guess how many companies were still mandating vaccines in February 2024? It essentially solved a problem that no longer existed in Texas. That bill was about 3 years too late.
Wow.
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah, and countless Texans either lost their jobs or they consented to a vaccine that they didn't want or they didn't need, and many of them were damaged or injured.
We said we'd just all move to Belize and open our own clinic.
There you go. I honeymoon in Belize. That's beautiful. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Well, this is like a very dark industry,
Yes,
right? I mean,
yes.
there's a lot of really, I mean, this is an industry that will always put profits over patients, right? I mean, you see this time and time again. Well, let me just finish this thought. It is a very intentional choice every day to wake up and choose to find the joy and find the hope and be optimistic. I would be a pretty miserable person if I didn't, right? And we are very clear here at TFEC that we are called to work hard and strive with excellence, not perfection, but to work with excellence. But there's a lot of peace at the end of the day knowing that the results are the Lord's. And so we give nothing about Texans for Vaccine Choices story makes sense on paper, right? I mean, this is the modern day David and Goliath. Nobody wakes up one day and says, let's take on big pharma politics, right? That sounds like fun, right? This truly is a mission and a calling, and we best decide to give it to who it belongs to. Did you
I was
have
going to say, what isn't, Texas is one of only 10 states that allows unlimited outside the state financial contributions. Didn't Bill Gates spend billions and billions to promote the vaccine industry?
Bill Gates, George Soros, a lot of these bad actors, yes, sir.
Mark Zuckerberg.
There's a lot of people, I love the ear live streaming. There's a lot, I don't know which phone is, which one
This one,
is live streaming. There's a lot of people that deserve to be in prison, right? A lot of people.
Starting with Dr. Fauci.
Dr. Fauci, you're on the top of my list, sir, and I'm not going to apologize for it. As the days go by, I'm going to also be very honest and say I think the likelihood of that happening, of justice being served on this side of heaven, is getting lower and lower, right? This is getting further in the rear view, and people are just like, let's just forget it happened. I don't want to forget that it happened, right? We shouldn't let them allow us to forget, right? But we also have to live in reality and where we are, and that is that the federal government is not going to come and save us on this, right? 95% of vaccine policy is set at a state level. That's why it's really exciting, like what Bobby Kennedy could possibly do at HHS, right? But regardless of what he does, it does not change the state level fight. It simply does not. This is a state's fight. All of those statutes that I was reading off are state statutes. The federal government has essentially very little to do with what we're fighting against here in Texas.
That's
All of that was for free.
yeah, that's awesome. Okay, that was great. you so much. Okay, well, I guess we'll pray one more time to close it out. So, Father, thank you again. Thank you for bringing Rebecca Harney here and giving her that insight and just long-term commitment. Father, we just praise you and thank you that you're helping people everywhere to stand up, to be bold, to be educated so they can be confident in what they're talking about. And as you pray that the people will ask you to show them the truth and let them know the truth and be freed by it. And just to be filled with you so they can stand strong on whatever the issues are. In Jesus'